Right, today I'm here with our physio Jules, and we are showing you out there who have sore necks how to strengthen it, because in our clinic the biggest thing apart from stiffness is weakness that is giving people a recurrent soreness in their neck, and especially for people who sit at a desk and have really bad posture. So today it was all about strengthening the front and the back of the neck. Now you might need one of these, TheraBand, of course, because we love those, but the rest is basically just using yourself. So Jules is in our first exercise position, which is what we call deep neck flexor. Okay, now deep neck flexors are in the neck. Now when we do this exercise, we don't want our big ones doing the job, we want our small ones doing the job. So Jules, if you put two fingers on here, what she's going to monitor is whether her sternocleidomastoids, which is the big suckers in here, are not working. So we don't want the big ones working, we want the small ones working. So the way you do that is doing an exercise and making sure the big ones don't come on. So what I'll get her to do is put two fingers here, one on each sternocleidomastoid. Now to find your sternocleidomastoid, if you look at that, when she raises her neck, see those two big ones there? That is your SCM. Now that's what you don't want to be working. So she's feeling for whether that fires or not. If it starts firing, she stops and doesn't go any further. And what she's going to do is she's going to try and go into cervical flexion. She's going to try and use muscles in her throat, if you like, to nod her chin down and then lengthen the back of the neck. Now you might have seen this like, this is silly, this exercise, but this exercise is just like doing transverse abdominis or core work for your lower back. It's like the core work, the activation work for your neck, and it's so important. It's boring as, but it's really good. So what I want her doing is tucking her chin down, so going into flexion. Now if you guys are struggling with this, what you can do is stick the tongue on your roof of your mouth when you do it. That'll engage a few throat muscles and sort of stabilize that hyoid bone, and that'll give you a bit of something to use to try and get those deep neck flexors working. Okay, so she's going to tongue on roof of her mouth. She's going to slowly nod down all the way until that SCM is about to fire, and she can feel that tone just about to kick in, and then she releases off. Alright, so she's also trying to think about sliding the back of her head like a bowling ball and nodding that chin down until that one fires. Okay, so you're only allowed to move as far as that one is about to fire up. Okay, so she doesn't go down too hard, otherwise that's pointless. That's like working your outer core. We're trying to work the inner core. Now those muscles there are the ones, the strength in the front is going to stop you doing that so much. Okay, so if they're a bit stronger, they'll pull you in a natural tone in that position. So people who have bad posture like that, these ones are really long and they're just switched off. So therefore if they're switched off all the time, they're weak, and then it's hard to maintain a good posture that way. All right, so this is going to help her. So good for strengthening, but also really good for an acute neck that's really sore. Okay, so that's our first one. Second one is deep neck extensors. Let's say that again. Deep neck extensors. So she used to be on her front. So again, you can use a bit of a towel or you can use your hands. So for this exercise, she's going to do working extensors this way, but I'm also going to get her to do neck flexors in the front. Okay, so she's going to a bit of co-contract now. So that's why we do that one first. So she's got the idea of what muscles she's got to use here to then work them with this one. Okay, now this is like if you think of doing a one-arm leg raise, like a bird dog for your lower back. This is almost a bird dog for your back. Okay, so it's strengthening statically the spinal extensors here, and she's working in the front as well. Okay, she's getting co-contraction of her core for her neck, if you like. Now, first thing, shoulder blades. Best thing we want doing is sitting down. So she's going to try and depress those shoulder blades, not retract them, just depress them a little bit. Okay, and then she's going to push her hands down into the ground just a little bit as well. So she's got a bit of scapular stabilization there, which is giving her a base of support so she can use her spinal extensors. All right. So now what she's going to do is she's going to lift her forehead off her hands, but what I want you thinking about is tucking her chin up to the ceiling. So she's going to raise her chin up. All right. So you can see these are working already. So these are switched on here, but she's working underneath. She's working her deep neck flexors, and if it helps her, she can put her tongue on the roof of her mouth to hold that up, and that's a 10-second hold. So this is a lot longer, this one, and then she drops down, relaxes, let that go, let the shoulder blades go, relax for 5, and then reset it. So shoulder blades down, push down with the hands, and then up comes the chin. And you notice I don't want her extending her lower back too much, upper back too much. So I don't want her going up through here. It's more here. The other thing I'm not letting her do is I don't want to do that. Okay, we're not doing cervical extension. All right, we're trying to get static extensors working, but doing it in a retraction position, which is the position you want to be coming back into with bad posture. If you're in that protracted position, you're trying to be in this retracted position. Okay, so you need the muscles of the back of the neck and the front of the neck a little bit stronger. You don't go and do that. So there's no point strengthening that way for this situation. Okay, it's up into retraction. So in prone, but retraction. Okay, 10-second holds. Probably about 20 of those. We'll split up into maybe 10 and then another 10. Okay? Now, those two exercises are the low-level exercises. They're the front and the back of your neck. Then we move to more advanced stuff. All right? So if you come up into all fours, Jules, the advanced work, this looks a bit sort of full on, but it's not. But I wouldn't do this first up. You've got to do an acute neck. You probably do this once you're down the track, the pain's gone down a bit, you want to strengthen it. There you go. So this is going into all fours. So we've got gravity. We've also got a band, so we're going to do the same exercise, okay, but we've got resistance. Now, you've got to be careful with this one. We don't want to make sure this hurts. We don't want to overcompensate either. So she needs to be up into a little bit more neutral. There we go. Make sure her core's on, all that's working. This band is obviously pulling her this way, okay. So she's going to let her head go down with the band this way into protection. So bad posture that way. And then she's going to reverse and stretch the band. There we go, see that? And then slowly down. Now the down part's the hard part. She's already struggling a little bit. The up part's not too bad because you can feel the resistance, but you've got to control this vertically down, not tilting the head that way. And come on, you feel that? You okay? So, no pain with this one, all right? So if it's painful, go back to the previous exercise. This one, you'll notice she's actually moving through range now. So we've gone from static or isometric to moving. Okay, so she's getting that spine moving through range. And this is really going to get that strength work there. The resistance added the load, which gives you that more strength. So that's great. Okay, so that's an easy one to do. All right, so we're going to do 2 advanced, semi-advanced isometric exercises. The first one is just called isometrics, but we do it in every direction, and the second one is a wall end just for the back. So the first one is her getting your patient, Jules in this regard, this looks a bit silly, right? But pushing her head into her hand, okay? So what I want her doing is trying to use, now look at this. Can you see she's automatically switched these on, okay? So you can see this is more advanced stuff. Before we were trying to use just her deep neck flexors. Now we're cranking up everything through there. So I still want the tongue on her roof of her mouth to try and engage that. She's going to push in against her hand right up to the point of pain. Okay, so she doesn't push so hard that it causes pain, but she's trying to hold that for at least sort of 10 seconds, maybe 20, maybe 30 seconds. So she's building up that endurance. Release that off. Then she works on back. Okay, so she's got to push back, but don't move. So she doesn't go into there. She gets into the neutral position. She pushes forward with her hand and back with her head. Okay, same thing. So she'll feel that working up the back of her neck. So you only press as much as you need to. As much as you want to push with your hand, you've got to resist with your head, and you go right to the point where it's just about getting painful. That means you know that those muscles are not going to get sore tomorrow, but you're working at your optimal ability. Then sideways. So she's going to push sideways. Now make sure she doesn't tilt her head over. So there's no point sort of pushing your head over to the side. She's going to make sure that she does not move her head from neutral. So maybe using a mirror is a good idea. And then go to the side. Pretty easy stuff. Okay. And I'd work on those 4. If you want to advance that, you work on a bit of rotation, which is going and looking. So if she goes on the side of her face, she's going to crank to the right. She's going to push that way, okay, which gets you some rotation work in there, okay. Now this is getting pretty nitty gritty, but for some people that have problems in all directions from really chronic weakness, it's awesome, all right. And then the last one, which looks a wee bit controversial, but it is good, is your wall lean. Now this is the point where you're really gaining for some strength. So for her, tips are, I would get this because it just looks after the back of her head, because sometimes leaning on a wall is a bit tough. So that's just for padding, all right? So she's going to lean on that. Her shoulders and hips are on the wall, okay? But you can see her feet are away. Now, how far away you are is how much load you want to put through your neck. So you could be a little bit away from the wall and it won't be much load. You could be a long way from the wall and it's going to be a big bit of load. So be careful when you start how far away you go. Now from here, first thing she's going to do is turn on her core here because we want her stabilised, all right? So she's got to switch on her pelvic floor, tighten up here a little bit. She's going to turn on her throat muscles a little bit too. So we want her upper core going. Then she's going to push away from the wall with her bum. Okay, now not too far because we don't want to overextend. At that point, she's got to turn on her glutes, and then she's going to push through her head to push her shoulders off the wall. See how she just lifted there? All right, so now she's in a plank. If you look at her sideways, she's in a plank that way, okay, from her feet. So she should be feeling this from her feet, tight through her knees, glutes, core, shoulder blades down, back of the neck, breathing, okay, and she's working this quite a lot. So those back extensors are holding her up, but it's not a massive amount of load. It feels quite a lot, okay, just shoulders back for me. And I'd start at 30 seconds and maybe build to a minute, all right. She waits for a bit and goes again. Now, you can do that again, Jules. Come off you come, push through the neck. Now, what's going to happen is that is quite a high load for the neck. It feels really good after. You get a bit of an analgesic effect, but it can make your head feel sort of quite sort of light and bobby. So just be careful you don't get dizzy from this one. This is a really, really nice one to do for your back extensors. It really helps out with holding your head up in this position, especially if you're sitting, if you're at a computer, but also in the gym, okay? So it stops that sort of head forward position, gives you a bit of strength there, because a lot of people have the weakness from so much pain. So give those 5 a crack. But if you've got neck pain, she hasn't got it, but if you've got neck pain at home, don't just roar straight in this. I would see a physio, make sure these exercises are right for you, and there's nothing else you need to do, or there's any treatment that you need to do before you launch straight into this. But if you've been given this sort of exercise, here's some homework for you. Right, today's rehab session is about strengthening your lower back. Now, this is really, really good for people who have actually injured their lower back and they're on their way back to doing things like lifting, squatting, deadlifting, and they've done their core work, they're working on their glutes, they're working on maybe some hip hinging work, but they haven't really got enough strength in their lower back. Now, this can happen sometimes when you've injured the muscle tissue in your lower back, and sometimes it's like you'd call it a strain. There might be an underlying disc problem there that you've cleared up, but you've still got the muscle weakness. Now, people with back pain here, and especially that goes down into the hips, if you've got pain going into those tissues, you're probably going to get some deactivation and then some weakness. If you strain that muscle tissue because you've lifted something, you're probably going to have some weakness as well. And most people work on their core, work on their glutes, maybe work on some patterns of movement, but when they get back to deadlifting or squatting, they still get a bit of back pain. And it's not always how strong your core or your glutes are. It might be because your back simply needs muscle strengthening. And it's hard, and a lot of people don't do it well enough. So I'm going to give you some progressions to go from very easy stuff to get you on board with learning how to get your back a little bit stronger in the lower part, and then building up to more sports specific stuff. So the first thing I want to get people doing is actually getting their lumbar extensors, okay, getting those muscle tissues that work as like a stabilizer when you lift, but also they work as an isotonic movement when you bend forward naturally. So if you imagine I'm going to bend forward and pick up something and come up, I'm doing lumbar extension there. I need those muscles to actually extend my back. So same with I was going to pick up something from there, pick up something light, I'll round my back, I'll use my lumbar extensors in conjunction with the rest of my body to lift me up. But if I was deadlifting something heavy, I use my lumbar extensors to be a stabilizer, and so I don't move there and I move at the hip. Okay, but for those people who need a bit of strength in there, we're going to work on the actual muscle tissue in sort of a hybrid, if you like, from doing a little bit of lumbar extension and some hip extension at the same time. So we're working those two things together. So there's a bit of isometric work and a bit of isotonic work in every little exercise. The first one I want you to work on is going from this 4-point position here like that, okay, and trying to go from here and lifting up in this position here. Now you might think that's pretty easy stuff, okay? And for some people it is, but some people it's really, really hard because you've got to try and stabilize through here at the same time. What I don't want you doing is just working on straight hip extension like that and jamming up your lower back and really loading up those muscle tissues. Remember, this is a very low level exercise. It's the first thing that people work on. So it's important that once you've got your neutral spine organized, you've got that ability to brace through your core here and turn that on, then you go for your straight leg and you go from a hip extension, and there's going to be a little bit of back extension at the top. So mostly no back extension for the first part here, so that doesn't move from there to there. When you get up in a hip extension, then you go a little bit more and you get a little bit extra hip extension, and that's where you work from an isometric type movement with those muscles to stabilize the initial movement, and then do a little bit more into extending the lower back just a little bit. I think the crucial thing about that is not extending initially. Like the first thing you do is don't extend the lower back. It's the last thing you do, okay? Now, to take that one step further, what you could work on, if you find that a little bit easy, is work on a ball. Some people work on a sofa on a ball, and do the same thing here like that, into this position, and then you can really feel the feedback of your tummy on here, okay? You can feel that whether you're pushing down into the ball or whether you're keeping that tone and keeping it braced. So from this position here, you can go and work on trying to get some more extension there, and you'll really feel it in your glutes. That's good glute activation, right? But you're really aiming for the lower back to be doing the work. So from here, drawing in, up, and then extending without overcooking it. You don't want to be doing this sort of work and jamming up and extending that lower back too much. There's no point doing that. It's just going to make you sorer. All right? We want to get to the point where we're just getting a little bit of tone, a little bit of activation through there, building up that base strength to do the harder stuff later. So once you progress on that ball and there's no, you're feeling a little bit better, there's less pain. Remember, some of these exercises can be pain relievers because if you get pain from having a weak lower back, you get it more activated, a little bit more strength, you'll have less pain. So the next thing I want you to try and work on is actually moving that lower back up from flexion to extension, just like you would if you bent over, picked up something off the floor and came up again. Okay, now this is not the heavy stuff, this is just the light stuff. So again, you could use a ball for this, but what you've got to try and do is make sure you sort of but make sure you're firmly planted with your knees and your feet here. So I'd probably point your toes and bring your toes into dorsiflexion, I should say, and get into there so you've got a bit of grip. And then from this position, you're going to do an upright Y. So again, drawing this on, remember it's important to have that co-contraction around your spine, so you're not just extending with no abdominals. So from that point there, you're going to come up with your thumbs and then use your whole back to then extend at the top. And just stop at the point where you're just about to feel fatigue or that jamming feeling through that lumbar spine. Because this will work your QLs, work your lumbar deep extensors through here. It'll work them to extend your lower back, and you've got to try and make sure you've got a bit of glute on there at the same time. You're trying to tell your body, when I extend, as in when I bend forward, pick up something off the floor, I want my extensors working, want them stronger, but also want my glutes to work in a hinge to help out, okay? You're not just going to bend forward and not use your glutes and your hammies. They're going to help stabilize and extend the hip and help lift the back up in that posterior chain type fashion. So let's just run through that again. Drawing in, thumbs up first, get that up, a bit of load, and then extend upwards as much as you can without losing stability, and then slowly down. Nice, slow, controlled reps, keeping your core and a bit of glute on to stabilize, to learn that pattern of movement. And you'll find that that sort of movement helps you with this whole bending forward, coming up, that nice bending over, rounding your lower back, coming up, extending, but working everything to help you up, not just one thing. So that's the sort of the baseline stuff. Then what I'd try and work on is getting things a little bit harder. And that involves going to doing, I'll show you here, hip extension off the bed. All right. So this thing will definitely load up your back a little more. Now that we were working on lifting up your back, this one we're lifting up your legs. So you'll need probably, a kitchen table or even your bed at home. That's the thing. We've got a plinth obviously we can use to hold on to, so you can use your legs as the lever. So the first thing I'd do is work on perhaps one leg to get the movement right, then work on the two legs to get the load. So the one leg movement is just trying to work out how you're going to hang on, keep your core on here, keep neutral here, and again, same sort of movement there, making sure you know what you're doing here. And if you've done this on the ball before, you know what you're sort of working on. Okay, so this point here, then you think, okay, I've got to lift 2 legs now. So you're going to stabilize, draw on here first, don't hold your breath, and then work on just floating your feet up and lifting. And you might get halfway and then down. Just a little bit of load. The first little bit is you don't want to overextend your back and jam it up. We want to just make sure we add a bit of load into the lower back so it stabilizes and handles the weight of the legs. So this point here, I'm just going to come up a little bit higher now and then come down. Again, nice, slow, controlled. Now this will definitely make you do hip extension, of course, and you're using your glutes, but your lower back is going to take the load. So you'll come up eventually going as sort of high as you can, and you'll probably find you won't actually overarch your back too much. Okay, now if people get pain with this, the load's too much, they're not ready for it, you need to go back and do the other stuff. But there's no pain, only fatigue, then that's okay. Because as with all exercises involve muscle fatigue, you build that up, you'll get stronger and stronger and stronger if you go carefully and slowly. There's no point doing this too quick or too fast or too much load. From that point, some people could add on some load to the ankles. Okay, so you can put a weight on, hold a plate, hold a kettlebell, that sort of thing, and that'll increase the load a little bit more, and I'll show you that. So what I mean by adding weight is maybe just a dumbbell. Now this is only 4 kilos, but when you put it, say, between your legs, and again, you've got to hold on to this thing, so you've got to keep your legs together, that weight there is on the end of your leg, meaning it's about the leverage and how long your legs are. The longer your legs, obviously the more load through your lower back. So don't overcook it and put something too heavy on there. And the way you gauge that is obviously how you're feeling your lower back with your fatigue. I don't want any pain with this, but you've got to make sure that you can actually get to the same height as you did without the weight. So if you're doing this and say you got to horizontal and now you can only sort of get to there, then the weight's too heavy. So you need to drop that weight down, okay? And remember, any little bit of weight is more load, so it doesn't really matter, because if you try and do too much load and don't get the height, it's really a waste of time and you're not going to get the full benefit out of it. So making sure you can keep that core on, lift it up right into up there, and you'll find that that's way harder. Of course your reps and sets can go down a little bit, but if you can only get 3 or 4 out, it's too heavy. Okay, so the final section of this is doing a lumbar extension off a bed or a plinth like we've got. Now, you could easily do this in the gym or you could do it at home, but you need a partner. So I've used Joe here because they've got to hold your legs down while you're doing it. Now I'm going to give you some tips on this so you don't go and make your back more sore, and make sure you really isolate what you're trying to achieve. So this one, you're going to do lumbar extension. Now there's going to be some hip extension in there as well, but what we just want to make sure of is you're really making sure you turn your core on, okay, and you're using your hip extensors to do your lumbar extension as well. You just don't want to go into hyperextension. So what I mean is, when you come up, you don't want to go and really overcook it and go into this hyperextension like this, okay? You want to come up just to neutral, so you're in that hip extension and lumbar extension, okay? Now this first one is an isometric hold, so you're going to go and try and get everything sorted here, get that core on, make sure your glutes are going on to do that hip extension, and then you come up into that lumbar extension and just hold it there as the isometric hold. So that's where you're going to start feeling it through that lower back, feeling a little bit of muscle fatigue in here, making sure your glutes on, making sure your core's on, you're breathing up in here, you're not holding your breath, and just keeping that position for an extended period of time. And obviously you've got to try and at least get to 30 seconds. You want to be building to a minute if you possibly can without the pain. Okay, and that's your first one. Then what you want to work on is doing repetitions of that and trying to get that quality of movement going well, again, without hyperextending. So nice and slow reps, turning on all the muscles in that posterior chain, shoulders back a bit, holding there, and then slowly down, and going for repetitions of this. Instead of a isometric hold that you go for endurance, this is going for repetitions and getting into that lumbar extension and really diving into that lower back. Now once you've done that, the progression on, of course, is a weight like this, okay? So you can do a mixture of doing isometric holds of the plate, so coming in, isometric holds like that, or you can do the repetition work where you're doing that lumbar spine extension with a bit hip extension into there to try and strengthen up that lower back. So there's a nice little progression of exercises to get you doing lumbar extension and to strengthen up those muscles right down deep in the lumbar spine. Of course, to complement all the core work you've been doing, to help you with bending over, picking up items, deadlifting, that sort of thing. Now, this is really good for home, but if you've got the luxury of going to the gym still, then you can start using a Roman chair and a glute ham raise machine. See how you go? See you next time.